Hi everyone, I'm Kristen. Welcome and welcome back. It is August 10th, which means that it is the start of a new vlog style monthly wrap up. I am popping in to get this started. I've actually finished 2 books so far this month, and I am quite well into a third and like a decent amount into a fourth actually. But to be fair, one of the books that I finished, I read like 80% of in July, and that was my pick my next book for the month of July. So I will be able to wrap that up finally. And I just want to say, as we're like in the month that I am due, I have no idea when this is going to come out. So I'll start that off by saying no clue when you're seeing this, as I am due at the end of this month, in like 2 weeks from now. So I think what I'm going to do is like basically every time I finish like one of these little snippets, I'm going to like film like an outro, like, okay, see you when I see ya. And hopefully I'll be able to edit it, and I can like remove it from each time or whatever, but that's where we're at. Let's just jump right into August. So I had a really slow reading month in July in that I only finished 2 books and a novella, and then started but wasn't able to finish like a whole whack of other books. Early on in August, I picked up Bitter Medicine by Mia Tsai, I think. I will pop it up on one of the 2 corners. And this is actually a book that I did put in my Pick My Next for August, which today is the last day to vote for that. But I just decided I was going to read it anyway. So Bitter Medicine came out in March of this year. I really had heard nothing about it until Angela from the channel Literature Science Alliance included it in her recent releases roundup for, I think it was March. And what she said about like the reviews that she had compiled for that really caught my eye. It sounded like just like a really nice, potentially cozy fantasy, like contemporary urban kind of fantasy romance to check out. What do I want to say about Bitter Medicine? So I would say that it is like low stakes fantasy romance or romantasy, whatever. It is set in our world, but it doesn't really like focus on our world. It's more just like they're in Paris, they're in London, they're in New York, they're in Raleigh. I think that's in North Carolina, I'm not even sure. So they're in our world, but they are basically like magical, the main characters in dual POV, the main characters are magical beings. One is like half elf, the guy, Luke, is half elf, and the girl, I'm forgetting her name, she is, I think she goes by Elle. And she is descended from a Chinese god of medicine. And the setup here is that they work for like this magical temp agency, sort of. So they just like, it's like an agency of fae people that provides them with jobs. And both our main characters, Luke and Elle, work at this agency. Luke is really, really high up there in a security type role. And Elle works like a really menial role that is well beneath her capabilities in magic, but she is trying to like keep a low profile for reasons. And the two, Luke is a customer of hers, and the two are kind of close acquaintances, very friendly. He's a very friendly customer at her job, and the book starts out, they already know each other, and it's very clear that they both like really, really are into each other, but it's never been like a topic that's been broached. You know, things progress plot-wise in that they are sort of forced not really to work together. It's not like they're forced to work together to like solve this crime, but more that he's on a case that perhaps involves her. And around this time also they begin to perhaps maybe like be a little bit more upfront about their feelings. What I would say is like the tone and the whole vibe of this book is just really kind of nice and quiet. There is plot, there's stuff going on, there's like a big conflict, like a big dramatic conflict scene that takes place surprisingly early, which I will say I think was done okay in this book, because I think that can go poorly. But it just has this overall like quiet tone as we get to know Luke and Elle and their hang-ups as they like slowly continue to connect and communicate about their feelings. And this is like one of those like, yay, great communication relationship fantasy romance books. I loved it because they just like connect really well. They both are very open with each other as things progress, and they have really great communication, but they do still have their own hangups. So there are moments when they aren't communicating as well, or when their own like personal growth journey causes hiccups within them connecting. And that happens from both ends. It's not like one, goes through something and the other one doesn't. In this one, they're both dealing with their own stuff as it pertains to like the unfolding of the plot or the rollout of the plot. On that note, you can tell that we are like racing towards like a little bit of a climax with this particular case that Luke is working on that involves Elle, and you know that there's going to be like a little bit of some reveals and to what extent that will play into their, connection, etc. It went surprisingly well in that it didn't have the conflict wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So kudos for that. And then additionally, it took place like probably at the 2/3 mark. So then usually when you have like a big climax, the rest of the, like that's that early on, the rest of the book is like kind of slow and you're like, what are we still doing here? But you also don't want the climax to happen like right at the very end with like no tying up of things. But really it's because this book wasn't about that case. It wasn't about that thing. It was about the emotional like growth that Elle and Luke are on. I'm gonna be so embarrassed if her name is not Elle and I just call her Elle this whole time. Whatever. So it's really more about the emotional journey and growth that Elle and Luke are on, and not necessarily as the relationship, but like, yes, that too, but them overcoming some things. So yes, there's a dramatic conflict that takes place with like some action, but it continues like the arc of the story, and actually there's like a more emotional arc and climax that takes place a little bit later on, because that's the main point here. So if you are looking for a quieter, cozier, romance-heavy, casually fantastical book, that's how I would describe it, I really think you should check it out. I do think you're going to have to be in the right mood for it. Like I said, it's quiet. I felt slow-moving in that it wasn't like filled with drama. Stuff is happening, for sure. The relationship is really cute, more than like, there's not a little bit angsty maybe, not a ton angsty, more just like really sweet. Like you just feel so sweet and cozy and affectionate towards the two characters and towards them coming together. It is descriptive, but not in a like smutty, sensationalized way. More just like, yeah, stuff was happening. They did stuff. But overall, sweet, quiet. I am so hesitant to use the word cozy now because I don't think this really falls into the cozy fantasy. But there is that element that like I wouldn't pick this up if I want like a riveting, fast, or even like a smutty, drama-filled good time. It's more like you want something to like nicely pick away at, explore this like emotional journey that Luke and Elle are on for some good communication. That is Bitter Medicine. That is how I felt about it. Really, really enjoyed it. A little bit long. Could have been shorter. Definitely could have been shorter. But overall, really, really, really enjoyed it. I would absolutely pick up another book by this author. Apparently this was their debut. So amazing. The next book that I picked up was the July Pick My Next Winner. So I had obviously picked this up in July and I was reading it. And if you watched my wrap up from last month, you'll know that at like the 80% mark, the library took it back from me. So fortunately, I did not have to wait very long, and I was able to get the copy like returned to me again very, very quickly. And I was able to read the remainder of the book, or the remaining, quarter. So because that was a Pick My Next Winner, it means that there's going to be a full, breakdown review coming. You guys voted for it to be a vlog last time in July. So because I have finished it, obviously the vlog is also like almost ready to come out. So that should be coming up shortly. You'll be able to see like in-depth, detailed thoughts about what I thought of Empire of Exiles. So I don't want to say too much. I will try to keep this brief, and then you can check out the vlog if you would like to know like deeper thoughts. But this is a fantasy book following a few different characters who get swept up into a potentially returning uprising. So we're following our main character, I would say, is Quill, who is sort of like something kind of like a lawyer in this world. And at the start, sort of like the synopsis description of what this book was about was that he is sent as part of his roles. It's a large encompassing kind of role. But one of the things that he does is that he was sent to this like archives to collect some artifacts, historical significant artifacts for a particular dukedom family, like one of the, like a wealthy noble family, that's the word. But one of the items was like a banner, like a really important symbol that was used during a coup that took place, or an attempted coup rather, that took place about 23-ish years in the past. And so like that's a little bit suspicious to start with, and then while he's in the process of doing this, he witnesses the results, like the immediate after effects of a murder that involves someone close to him. That's kind of like the back of the book setup here. We also follow one of the archivists, actually two of the archivists, Yini, who is an ink specialist, and I'll talk about the magic system in a minute, and then also, damn, I'm so bad with names. I just read this. Anyway, then we follow someone who is more of a generalist, someone who like has like a higher administrative role within the archives and has like a potentially interesting past. And then we also follow the detective who is on the case of the murder that Quill witnesses. And then we also get some flashbacks. In fact, we start with a flashback to 23 years ago, right after the coup is sort of like, shut down. I think that the POVs were done like very well. The characters were interesting. Some of them a little bit more so than others. I definitely enjoyed some of the POVs more than some of the other ones, more just for like, interest sake, and a little bit to a certain extent, I felt like they were developed to different levels of who they were. I will say that I think Quill was done particularly well as a character and as someone in particular who is going through the events of this book, where he witnesses a traumatic event, and then in relation to that also is being confronted with the idea that he might not have known someone as well as he did, or he felt like he knows someone very well, but everyone else around him is telling him, well, you couldn't have because he this just happened. And then on top of that, dealing with an extreme amount of grief. Atypical, I think, to how one could expect this book to go. Quill kind of reacts as if a real person would in those situations where he is struggling. He has moments of overwhelm with his grief. He has moments where he's confused and frustrated with the system. And because of that, he sort of like feels the need to take on like figuring out what really happened, because he doesn't really believe that the justice system, or that basically he thinks there's going to be a cover-up. And he's not like suddenly a really good detective, like he's not. And he has those moments of like, wait a second, maybe it was them. It could be them for this reason, or it could be that guy because of, these things. And he kind of like spirals at times in a way that is very genuine. And so I appreciated that realness of the way that his character was written. One thing that I didn't think was well done was the relationship building. None of the relationships have progressed to the extent that they're like, these people are a couple by the end of this book. I don't think that's spoilery, but you can see it coming. And I just felt like it was clunky. I just felt like the way that it was making it clear to the reader that those were going to be relationships in the future was just a little bit ham-fisted and a little bit clunky. I'll go back to a positive in that I think this was a super unique world. I don't want to go in too much into it, just because that would take forever, but I think it's a really, really unique setting. I think it's a really unique world. It has that like mystery conspiracy element, but done in a way that felt like more like a mystery book than what I was used to out of like mystery conspiracies within a fantasy setting. Like I feel like that's really, really heavily, part of the feel and vibe of this particular book. And maybe that will be completely different. In the next book, we'll see there was some like kind of reveals at the end. So I think if you're looking for something unique and a little bit different. This had that. And then con would be that it was the world building was maybe just like a little bit chaotic. You're just kind of dumped into it. At some point, they're like, oh, and so with his tentacles. And you're like, pardon me? So it turns out that it's not just humans that live in this world. There's like different species, except for that it never really thoroughly describes the different species. To this day, there's like different clans who all live, or like different peoples who all live in this place. And like, I'm not 100% certain on which ones are human. I know which ones like are definitely this like goat type being, but I don't know, because it was never really described all that well. And when people were introduced, it wasn't necessarily described what they were. I feel like offensive saying what for these fake populations, but it would be like you would be described, or like you'd be introduced to someone, blah, 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 and then be like tentacle, and you're like, oh, okay, one of those. So I will just say that the world building was like a little bit messy and a little bit scattered. But overall, I had a good time with this book. If it wasn't like my favorite new thing ever, I'm at least intrigued enough with like the conspiracy and like what went down in this book and what I like the potential of where we can go in the next book and the uniqueness of the world. I don't know that it was the one that I wanted to win for July. So I appreciate that you did make me pick it up so that I could read it, because it was like definitely worth it. I'll for sure pick up the next book in this one. Check out my vlog though. It should be coming out shortly, in the moment of when I'm sitting here doing this, but actually you've already seen it, so I will link it up above. Check it out if you want to hear more. That is that's what I have read so far. I am currently reading Cassiel's Servant by Jacqueline Carey, which was one of my like top 2 anticipated books from this year. It is a book that I purchased. I think it might be the first ebook that I've purchased, but actually I think I might have also purchased one in January and totally forgot. So I might have lied about that in my last reading wrap up. So I'm like in the latter half, I think maybe 3/4 of the way through Cassiel's Servant. And I will leave my thoughts on that for next time when I finish it. And I have also picked up 7 Faceless Saints, because I'm pretty sure that that's going to be the winner. And that one I'm doing an audiobook. So I'm pretty sure that is the winner for August, and I'm just trying to get ahead of the game here. So I really doubt that this is the last time you'll see me, but honestly, it could be. So if so, this is what I did in August, and I will update you in the future. I don't know, otherwise, I will see you next time. Hello, it is August 17th, so I have a little check-in, a little update for you, book and reading wise. I am still pregnant. I have not quite reached my due date, but it is very fast approaching. So as always, this could be it for the month, but we'll go from there. I do have some book updates. Let's get into it. So since we last checked in, I did finish Cassiel's Servant by Jacqueline Carey. And this is, I think they're calling it Cassiel's Legacy 1.5. Yeah, Cassiel's Legacy 1.5. So this is a retelling of Cassiel's Dart, but from Jocelyn's perspective. So it's kind of hard to talk about this specific book without being at all spoilery for Cassiel's Dart. So Cassiel's Dart is one of my favorite all-time books, and it follows a courtesan spy who has been God-touched to feel pleasure from pain. So in particular, she's a BDSM courtesan spy. Even though it sounds like it's going to be like really saucy and it's like sexy, it is so much more focused on the actual like politics of the world. There's a lot of conspiracies that are always going on that Phaedra, our main character in that series, like finds herself inserted in. If you don't want to know anything about Cassiel's Servant, because it might spoil some elements for that, like just skip ahead, I guess, to the next book. I will put in, there's obviously going to be timestamps, but so that's, this is from the perspective. Cassiel's Servant is like written and released 20 years after the release of that first book, from somebody else's point of view in that story. So at a certain point in Cassiel's Dart, Phaedra acquires sort of like a bodyguard, and his name is Jocelyn, and he ends up playing an important role throughout the rest of the series. So I will just say that my overall feelings about this book has been a little bit disappointing. I And it pains me to say that, but it just wasn't what I was hoping for out of this book. And I did have like very specific expectations of what this book could/should provide, given that it's a retelling of an existing book, where the two characters are in the same place for a significant portion of that book. So here's sort of like, I'll explain my expectations a little bit of what I was thinking that one should get out of this book, given the completeness of the other like existing book, and how this kind of didn't quite live up to that. I am going to do like a full review of this, so you can also check that out. But just like overall, my thought was that Jocelyn doesn't come into the main book, Cassiel's Dart, until the 33% mark. He comes in at about a third of the way through that first book. So there's like childhood upbringing, his training. He's from a very particular kind of like priesthood bodyguard order. So all of that happens before he's brought onto page in Cassiel's Dart. So we would presumably get that background info. And then there are times when he and Phaedra are not directly on page together, but generally, like, once he becomes his bodyguard, like, he's around for the rest of the book. However, it's like Phaedra that's doing all of the like spy work. She's piecing everything together. She gets stuff done. Phaedra is very much the driving force of unraveling stuff that's going on in Cassiel's Dart. So because there is that like completeness, it's not like there's like missing threads really that Jocelyn figured out in that in Cassiel's Dart, in the main book, let's say. So I thought what would make sense for this book to be is Jocelyn's reactions to everything that happens in the first book, or in Cassiel's Dart, his thought process of what is going on, as well as an insight into what he's thinking about in regards to some very specific character development. And to an extent, you'd think that you're getting like bodyguard, sword training kind of stuff. He's like a very meditative person as well. So it just wasn't any of that. Unfortunately, I feel like the amount of novel insight we got into what he's thinking about in kind of pivotal moments and scenes over the events of that book is so minimal. Like, you would get like at most a single page of him responding to a big event. And the rest was just description to some extent, or like an actual retelling of what they were up to, but maybe like just like from his perspective. There's literally like an intro to a chapter when he's like, after he gets this mission, which I thought would be a huge thing, because this was like, he was like really upset about this mission that he got. He's like someone who's like, very fancy, stuffy, should serve royalty, and he finds out he's going to be serving this courtesan. It's like the smallest amount of paragraph and page time dedicated to his response to this. And then we got like 2.5 pages of him preparing his saddlebags and preparing to journey to the city, in terms of like saying bye to people or like packing his bags and stuff. And you're like, why is this what we're focusing on? So it wasn't what I wanted. I wanted insight into what was going on behind Jocelyn's mind, what's going on behind his little, stiff bows all the time. And unfortunately, there was a very, very small amount of that. There was some of that. I almost am going to like bookmark specific moments and scenes of his reactions, so that in the future, when I reread Cassiel's Dart, as I will for the 15th, 20th time, who knows, I'll never reread all of Cassiel's Servant ever again. That's a certainty. But I will bookmark certain moments, so that when I'm reading Cassiel's Dart, I get to a certain point, I can flip back over to Cassiel's Servant, because yes, I did buy the ebook, and I can read just like a little moment of what Jocelyn is feeling or how he's thinking in that particular scene, just for that sense of completeness. But unfortunately, I don't really feel like, to spoil the review that I'm gonna do, like, I don't really feel like this provided all that much extra. So I am moderately disappointed with what this book provided. I also would say, just as like a writing conclusion element, that it had like the almost perfect moment of the ending. And then she added on an epilogue that just like continued on. It's like, why would you, that wasn't as emotionally momentous sort of as like the perfect ending of like the last chapter. And then she added on this epilogue and it was like, la la la, and then like we found out this happened next. And you're just like, why? You had a perfect ending and you like not ruined it, but you like tagged on this kind of bland extra information that we already knew because it's in the other book. So unfortunately, this huge anticipated release of mine that I have had my eye on since I found out that this was becoming a book in like 2018, 2019 maybe is when I found out about it. Either way, it was not what I wanted. It was not what I was looking for out of this experience, and that is a little bit disappointing. And that is all I will say in this format. And I will probably get more into it in my review with specific examples. Okay, the other update that I have, and yes, I'm drinking my smoothie out of like, oh, sorry, Poppy. Yes, I'm drinking my smoothie out of like the immersion blender container that I made it in. But the other update that I have is also not fabulous, and it's that I have DNF'd 7 Faceless Saints by MK Lob. This was the Pick My Next winner for the month of August, and this was a new release that I hadn't gotten to yet this year. I was listening to the audiobook. It's on Scribd, or at least it's on Scribd in my location. And I was powering through it because I really wanted to make sure that I was able to finish it and get it reviewed for you guys for this month before stuff happens. And unfortunately, I just like wasn't into it from a pretty early stage of being like, ooh, I don't think this is gonna super work for me. But I didn't want to DNF it because it was a Pick My Next winner. I was pushing through, and I finally just, talked to my friends about it. I was like, this isn't working for me, and I don't want to hate on it. I don't want to finish it just for the sake of finishing it. I don't want to hate on it, because it's a debut and it's a Canadian author. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to do a review sort of for it, but more in the sense of like why this didn't exactly work for me. And there are specific things that are more just like style and theme and writing content and like demographic. Like I am not the target audience for this book. I have not been super into YA, so I was already setting myself up for failure just by even putting this on the list, to be honest. This is Poppy. So the setup for this book is that we are following 2 characters in this like kind of Venetian-inspired city. The religion is based on these 7 saints. Obviously saints, it's like in the title. We're following 2 characters, both of whom are actually descendants, but occasionally the magic like skips the odd person. So one of our characters has magic, the other one doesn't. And they were childhood like friends, childhood loves, and something happened. Something really horrible happened, to be honest. Not directly involving them, but like involving their parents. And something happened, there's like a string of murders start happening, and they kind of team up to solve the murders together and like the underlying conspiracy and everything like that. I had heard going into this because Elle from Elliot Brooks talked about this when she read the book. One of the things that she noticed was that the amount of pining and thinking about the other person on the page was a lot. And I kind of thought, you know what? I haven't read a good YA fantasy like pining, angsty romance in a while. It could be fine. And it actually is very excessive. To the extent that I would say conservatively, 80% of the sentences involve thinking about, reminiscing on, noticing the other character. I also just didn't really gel with one of the characters. The guy I didn't find all that sympathetic. I don't want to say he was dumb, but I didn't think that he was the smartest person to be running this investigation. And he just kind of bothered me. just straight up didn't love what he was up to. And then the other thing was actually just thematically is that the religion here is really, really important. It's a little bit dogmatic, and that's actually something that I don't love reading about. I don't mind books that explore religion. I like when books critique and explore religion, but at least so far in this book, in this series, a large percentage of it is still very dogmatic. Even though the one character like totally questions it, and that was great, but the other character's not there yet, and was quite into it, and that just rubs me. I just didn't love it, especially when it's like problematic, when there's like very clear problems with what's going on because of the dogma, and the person is still really zealous about it. Then I have trouble being in their head a lot. So just thematically, didn't work for me. But if you like super like, you can put up with that in order to see the development and the exploration of where that goes in the long term, totally worth it. So that is all I will say about Seven Faceless Saints. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to finish it. I will do a review that's a little more specific and detailed about what didn't work for me and if it might work for you. What's up next? So I am currently reading a secret project that I can't even like ever tell you about. I can tell you about it eventually if things happen, but basically a very, very dear friend of mine has written a book and I'm reading a draft of it. I absolutely love it. I'm so loving it, so I feel really, really good about that. It's very early on stages, like in the draft, in the process of writing this book, but I'm really loving it, and so I can't really tell you anything about it other than that. So that's taking up some of my time, some of my reading time. I did order The Labyrinth's Heart by M.A. Carrick. This is the conclusion to The Liar's Knot. It came out, I think it was like, I saw both, or when I was talking to, I went on a little hunt for it yesterday. There's a fantasy dedicated bookstore here in Copenhagen that I went to called Fantasque. And, excuse me, they didn't have it, neither did the other bookstore that also carries fantasy books. But basically what they said is like it's coming out, I guess in the UK on August 17th, so it's actually coming out today. And that because we're in Denmark, they actually have to like, they don't even ship them from the UK to Denmark until the 17th. So I've ordered it. I will get it when it gets here and I'll be able to pick that up and finish that hopefully then. So not able to start that one. And that was all of my like super priority things for the month of August was Cassiel's Servant, The Pick My Next Winner, and The Labyrinth's Heart. So check, almost check. At least, hopefully. I have the other one's outside of my control. So what's coming up next? I don't want to pick up too much, to be honest, because of like, I want to have time for The Labyrinth's Heart once I get it. Thornhedge, which came out recently, the audio is available on Scribd. So this is it's a short T. Kingfisher book that I'm going to be able to listen to. So I'm going to probably start that because I don't have anything else going on audio-wise now that I'm not continuing on with Seven Faceless Saints. So I'm going to be able to read or listen to that audiobook. Super excited to get to that. And this is a retelling. It sounds like it's was it a Rapunzel? No, Sleeping Beauty retelling, but like not really focusing on Sleeping Beauty at all. And I've heard good things. I think my friend Kristen read it and absolutely loved it from Kristen Craig's books. The Justice for the Kings, I finally got a copy of, or like it became available at the library, and I've had that on hold basically since that was an option for whatever month that was included on, I think maybe June. But again, I kind of want to save my ebook, physical book reading space for The Labyrinth's Heart. So I don't think, I'm going to postpone that, I think, but then just to give myself room. But that's available, so that's good. I do really want to get to that. I bought a book while I was out book shopping yesterday. I know, August, I'm just like throwing money away here on books. But I bought a parenting book called The Danish Way of Parenting. So I'll pop that up. You can check it out. It's not super exciting, but I'm really curious about it. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to be picking up Thornhedge for audio, waiting for The Labyrinth's Heart, and in the meantime, reading my friend's book. So if this is it, if this is the last time I'm able to check in, I hope you have a great rest of your August. Otherwise, I'll just see you in the next clip. We'll see. Okay, hello. I am back for at least one more check-in. It is August 27th. I'm officially overdue. But I thought I should get in to update you because fingers crossed, any day now. So since I last checked in, I have just finished one thing, and that was Well, technically two things, but only one thing that I can talk about. So I did finish the book that my friend wrote. I really loved it, and we had a great conversation, like talking about, you know, some of the things that I noticed, some things that came up throughout it, some like possible tweaks and things like that. So it's like really, really cool to be in on, I guess, like that stage of like still planning and being like, sure, this was like a full book, but it's not like the final version, and like things could still change. So that was really cool. I had a really great time with that. But I obviously cannot tell you anything about that. But it was like a full length epic fantasy novel that I read this month that I just can't tell you about. And then I also finished Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher. This is their newest release, I think, and it came out in July. And it is a novella with a little bit of like a background retelling of Sleeping Beauty. And, you know, true to form, it had a very T. Kingfisher kind of take on the story of Sleeping Beauty. It was only a 4-hour audiobook, so you think that I would have gotten through that really quickly, like 4 hours at one-time speed. But honestly, it took me like multiple days, multiple sittings to listen to that novella. I mean, it's a super short book, so I really can't say that much about it without giving it away. But it's like a background alternate version of Sleeping Beauty, where we're actually following Toadling, who is Fae adjacent, and they are guarding the tower where Sleeping Beauty is asleep, and they have been doing so for quite a long time. And we get like a little bit of a back and forth retelling of like stuff that's happening in the moment at the tower, and then as well how this all came to be. And I just thought it was okay. It was just like the most okayest, finest kind of novella. It didn't really do too much for me. It was enjoyable to listen to, but I didn't find it like overly warm and cozy. It wasn't overly exciting. It wasn't just like it was just nothing in any big sense. Not that I expected it to be big, but it didn't have like a fullness in the feeling. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. Like, it was really distinct in a very T. Kingfisher way, but just nothing that like really did anything for me. So that is Thornhedge. I think it was totally fine. As kind of boring as that sounds, that's kind of the gist of what I got from it. Odds are I won't finish anything else by the end of the month, so I'll probably just leave it here. What am I up to? What am I reading? So I still have not received my copy of The Labyrinth's Heart by M.A. Carrick, the last book in Rick and Rose series. So I'm a little bit disappointed that hasn't come in yet, but I did decide this time to buy it like from a physical local bookstore. And so because of that, I have to like wait for, you know, importing from the UK. So in the meantime then, I kind of was like picking up other things because I wanted to save room for that. But I did finally just decide to, I was reading a sample, and then the library hold became available again. So I'm also reading The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan, I believe. And I'm actually really enjoying it. I'm like 30% in, really, really liking it. So yay. Hopefully I'll be able to read that or finish that up soon. And then obviously I have some audiobook space available as well. I think maybe I'll just start working on some of my sequels. I've got a ton of series that I started this year that I can listen to the sequels that I've been like saving for the fall. So you know what? Why not just start? Anyway, that is where I'm at. I will see you guys next time. Bye. Hey, so final update for you here. It is August 31st, and I have managed to finish one more book, and that was The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. So I'll be able to tell you how I felt about that, wrap up for the month. Quick note, I do have a really horrible head cold, so I sound super, super stuffed up. It's also like a really dark, dreary day outside, so the lighting is not ideal. But we're just gonna go with it. So overall, really, really loved The Justice of Kings. Not favorite of the year, but like not the favorite of the year. But maybe up there, to be honest. Like, I actually really, really liked it. And I'm finding it a little bit interesting and a little bit confusing why people
struggled with Helena as the narrator so much. So just a quick note on the Justice of Kings, if you don't know too much about this book, we're following Sir Conrad von Walt, but we're actually following his story from the perspective of his 19-year-old female clerk at the time. And Sir Conrad is a justice, which is within this empire. It's a huge, vast, expansive empire. But within the empire, the justices are basically their word is law. And they are kind of second only to the emperor. And they travel around the empire, taking cases, hearing cases and crimes, etc. But they're basically in this role, they are detective, judge, jury, and executioner. And as we follow Sir Conrad and through the eyes of his 19-year-old clerk, we get kind of swept up into a bit of a conspiracy as they are in the middle of solving a particularly murder case. So murder case, yeah. So that is the setup for this first book. A lot of people, when it first came out, had issues with the fact that the story was being told from Helena's perspective because it's not made clear in the synopsis. So if you're going into this book, know that Sir Conrad von Walt is not telling you his own story. And in particular, it's being told from her as a older woman, looking back on this particularly tumultuous time period in her life, or in the life of this empire. And people just really didn't like Helena. That was kind of the main critique that I heard last year, was that they didn't know that was going to be a thing, which I did. So I did know about that going in. But also people just generally didn't like Helena. They felt she was really whiny. She complained a lot. So what I'll say is that I found it was a really refreshing point of view. I do tend to like the here, let me tell you my story, or I'm telling you this story from the future. This is a past that I'm telling you. It was not as directly breaking the fourth wall as some of those versions are, which I actually liked. But I found that even more so this was refreshing because it was someone who is telling you about the events of this time, and they're still being pretty honest about what their focus and their priority was at this time period. So obviously, we know because we're reading this book, and because we can tell, we can see the signs, and there's some foreshadowing from adult, grown-up, old lady Helena, who's telling us this particular time period story. We know that stuff's going on and that stuff is going to be really big, but 19-year-old Helena of the time does not. And so I thought it was really refreshing to have a character of that age be really worried about this cute boy she meets on the street, or Sir Conrad or the other guy embarrassing her. And so yes, some of it was whiny, but I feel the critiques made me expect it to be so much more whiny and for her to be so much more of an annoying character than I actually found her to be. I thought she was very realistic for someone going through this time period in her life that just happens to be the beginnings of something perhaps larger at stake going on in the world. But Helena of the time does not know that. So it makes sense that she is thinking about other things or prioritizing other things. And I thought that was actually really refreshing, because often we have, in fantasy, whether it's young adult or adult fantasy, we often have young characters who care so much about their world and the justice and law and order and whatever. And realistically, depends. I thought that the relationship between her and Sir Conrad von Walt and the other guy, I'm forgetting his name because you guys know him, Bressinger? They've got a task man. I thought that the dynamic between the three of them was really fun. I thought, not fun, it's not lighthearted and fun, but I thought that they had a good banter and a realistic relationship dynamic for three people who spend all of their time together, working and traveling together. I really, really liked the mentor-mentee, almost father-daughter, brother-sister, the all-encompassing relationship between Helena and Sir Conrad and her view of him often. I really, really enjoyed that element, how Helena saw Sir Conrad. She saw all of his strengths as well as his flaws and still cared deeply for him as this mentor person who has taken her in. Whether or not she wants to follow through with his intended life path for her, she still, really, really cares about him and is very, very grateful and loves him in that kind of almost parent role, but still is very, very aware of his flaws. So I enjoyed seeing the changes and the things that Sir Conrad has to deal with as he's taking in the events of the story, but seeing that through Helena's eyes as she sees him, going through various stages of like denial, frustration, realization, all of the things that Sir Conrad deals with, we see through Helena's eyes. And I actually really, really enjoyed that. I thought the world at large was very interesting. It did get like a little bit overwhelming with some of the political world building. And at one point, one of the characters was like, explain it to me as if I'm a child. And then I actually really appreciated the explanation that we got there. It like broke it down a little bit more clearly for me, because otherwise there's like different like political groups that aren't super explained. When they're first introduced, they're not explained very clearly. And so you're not really sure what the positioning of stuff is. And so then when you get this like, no, break it down a little bit further for me. I was like a little bit on the nose, but I really appreciated it, to be honest. And then over the course of the book, it did start to make more sense. And you do start to see rumblings of like, oh, this is an issue, especially because too, then we have future Helena making it obvious that like, this was an issue. This was more of an issue than was believed by certain individuals at the time. I think if you were going into this like really, really wanting that like breakdown of like justice and law and order, I think that you could have a mixed opinion on how this went, because it does feel like we're in a bit of an upheaval of a time. I know that whole thing of him being like judge, jury, executioner all in one seems like it's like that's going to be the issue, and maybe it becomes an issue, but it didn't feel like that was actually what the issue was in the moment. It felt more like a larger scheme of the place of this justice figure in a changing world, and particularly such an expansive empire. I think that's mostly what I want to say about it. Again, like I really enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed the dynamics between the characters. And I really liked the political element. Like once we started going through like the shifting dynamics of the groups at play here, I'm on board. I am really looking forward to seeing where this goes, especially with how it ended. Like things took a bit of a turn, and I can see that we're going into something similar but different in the next book, and I'm really excited for that. Yeah, I feel like my biggest takeaway is I'm just like really shocked that people hated Helena so much, to be honest. It didn't sweep me off my feet, but it kept me engaged and turning the page, and it kept me like riveted in what was going on. I kept wanting to find out what was going on, not only like with the case, with like the murder case that they are investigating, but also with like the greater scheme of things within the world. So that was The Justice of Kings. Super glad that I was able to squeeze that in this year. I still haven't gotten, like, what's up next, etc. I still haven't gotten a copy of The Labyrinth's Heart, or I haven't gotten my copy of The Labyrinth's Heart, my physical copy that I have ordered from a local bookstore, which I'm assuming means that they're still waiting for it to come over from the UK, which I feel like that's a lot longer than I expected to wait, so maybe I will call them and see if maybe they've forgotten to let me know. But ultimately, I'm really disappointed that I haven't been able to get to that book in August, especially because it's going to be really hard to read a physical book moving forward. And my library has not gotten a copy yet, so ebook isn't even really an option, because my library, as of last time I checked, I guess, had not gotten a copy. My library copy of The Weaver and the Witch Queen by Genevieve Gornichek has come through, so I decided I might as well take that out. I'm not relying on audiobooks just yet, so I might as well try to squeeze this one in, because I do think it'll be a good like fall read, so I would really like to get to that. And this is a Norse-inspired historical fantasy, I'm assuming, because I think there's going to be like some witchy elements, following two girls. Really, it follows 3 girls, but I think we only get the perspective, the POV of 2 of them. One of whom wants to be a witch, but is also maybe destined to be one of the first queens of Norway or something like that. And the other one who just wants to find her sister or something like that, and their lives are entangled. So I have started that. I'm very, very early on. It is very, Viking-esque. And I think it'll be great. I think historical fantasy and I think Scandinavian Viking type stuff is also really good for the fall. So that is the next thing that I'm reading. That's what I'm reading at the moment. I feel like August was overall like maybe a better month than I was expecting. I feel like there had some like pretty big highs and lows. Like really enjoyed that I finished, or like really enjoyed Empire of Exiles, which I mean, I guess I read most of that in July, but also really enjoyed Justice of Kings and Bitter Medicine. I think that was this month as well. Like I had some like good highs, but then I had some, kind of disappointing lows as well, with not super being thrilled with what Cassiel's servant provided based on my expectations. Obviously, I had to DNF the Pick My Next for this month, so that's always disappointing. And then Thornhedge just like really wasn't much of anything, unfortunately. So overall, though, I think August was better than some of the months that I've had lately. So I will just leave you with that. Let me know how August went for you. Is there a book that you read this month that absolutely you loved? Did you have any big disappointments this year or this month like I did? Hit me up down below, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.